What's up guys, my name's Connor King with Resolute Capital. This video is inspired by the recent outbreak of the coronavirus, but this information applies all the time, and this is a fantastic example of why it is so important to have an emergency fund. Right now the economy is changing a lot, and it can be a very unknown time, especially for people scared of losing their job. A recent survey found that 49% of Americans could cover less than 1 month of expenses if they lost their income. In this video, we're going to show you why you need an emergency fund, 3 ways that you can save for your emergency fund. We're also going to help you define what an emergency actually is. And finally, we're going to show you a great place to keep your emergency fund. Let's get into it. This video is for entertainment purposes only, and you should always consult with a certified financial planner before making any decisions with your money. So what does an emergency fund do for you? It takes a crisis and turns it into an inconvenience. Say your air conditioning unit goes out and it's going to cost $3,000 to fix and you don't have any money saved. You're probably going to be freaking out and really anxious and probably losing sleep at night because you're going to have to find that money somewhere. But say you have a $20,000 emergency fund set aside, this $3,000 expense will just be an inconvenience because you'll be able to pay and get it fixed, and then over the next few months you can replenish your emergency fund back up to the original amount. So primarily, an emergency fund just gives you peace of mind and allows you to not panic when something bad and unexpected happens, and it allows you to make a lot more clear decisions because you have time to think through it and you're not stressed because you don't have the money. One of the first things you can do to help you save for your emergency fund is to automate your savings. If each month you have a set amount listed in your budget that goes towards savings, you won't have to think about it all the time, and it'll be a lot easier to do because each month it just automatically transfers to your emergency fund account. And so overall, it makes it a much easier process for you. Another great way to save is to trim down on your 3 biggest expenses, which for most people are housing, transportation, and food. The average American spends about $1,573 a month on housing. They spend $263 a month on eating out, and they spend $811 a month on transportation. So anywhere that you can make these 3 expenses cheaper would help you out a ton and help you save for your emergency fund a lot quicker. Finally, another great thing you can do is to distinguish your wants from your needs. Probably most everyone has expenses each month that are things that they really enjoy doing, but they don't necessarily need to do, which is totally normal. But a great thing you can do to save for your emergency fund quicker is to get rid of most of your wants, maybe just keep a few, because this will help you save a lot more money each month. So now Banks is going to join us, and we're going to talk about what are emergencies and what are not emergencies, and we're going to go over some examples. Because once you have your emergency fund fully funded, it's really easy to make a lot of things seem like emergencies when they're really not. A good guideline to go by is if you have predictable expenses, those should not be emergencies because you know they're coming, and so emergencies should only be something that you just can't predict.
So one scenario, more current events. Right now, stock market is down a good bit, 10 or 20% just in the last few days. And so it would be great for us to take some money and put it into the market because it's almost guaranteed that it's going to be going back up eventually. But say in a scenario we didn't have any extra cash right now and we only had our emergency fund, or what do we say about the scenario of taking some money from our emergency fund and putting it in the market when we feel so confident that it will be coming back up, but it is taking it from our emergency fund?
That is a great point. That is a very tempting thing to do. We were both just tempted earlier to do the same thing. But if you think about it, your emergency fund is for emergencies that you need to cover your necessary expenses like food, water, and housing. And so if you go by the guidelines, you shouldn't do that because you're taking money that's for emergencies to spend on necessary items, and growing wealth beyond what you already have is not necessary in the moment, even though it might be a great opportunity. And if you have other cash set aside that's not in your emergency fund, it'd probably be a great thing to do right now. But as far as taking it from your emergency fund to put in the stock market, you really shouldn't do that. Say you need new tires on your car, you get them every 4 or 5 years. Would this be something to consider an emergency?
Yeah, going along the guidelines we've talked about, definitely this shouldn't be an emergency because it's something that you're able to predict. And so hopefully, as you get a few months away from having to buy tires, you start saving a little bit of money each month to be able to pay for the tires. And so, again, this is a predictable expense and not something that comes out of nowhere. And so taking the time and the effort to be able to plan ahead and have the money for the tires is where you should be, and hopefully not taking from your emergency fund. But say you're in a place where you're trying to save up your emergency fund and you don't have any extra cash, but you come to a point where your tires, are really worn down and it's unsafe. That's in a scenario where you probably should take from your emergency fund to get new tires, because you need your tires to get to work, to make money, and to stay safe. And so you kind of have to look at each scenario on where you're at, but do everything you can to not take from your emergency fund, but just more of a last case, worst case scenario. So a common scenario to be in is a group of your friends want to go on a trip, and it's a nice trip. You'd only go on it once every 5 or so years, maybe $1,500. You don't want to miss out. It's a great opportunity, but you don't have money for it besides the emergency fund, and it's $1,500 that you're gonna have to pay.
I would want to do everything in my power to go on the trip, I'm sure. So I would try as hard as I can to. If I didn't have any money that's not in my emergency fund, then I shouldn't go on the trip because it's not an emergency. But what I would probably do is try to find other ways to cut back, maybe groceries, maybe drive less and save money on fuel. So I would try to save that money as quick as I could to not take from my emergency fund. That way I could go on the trip. But if I wasn't able to do that, then that's not an emergency, and so I shouldn't go. All right, so we think the best place to keep your emergency fund is in the online banking app called Simple. And later, we'll do more videos about Simple, but for now, I'll just show you a little bit about the emergency fund feature. In the app, it shows several account balances, and at the bottom it says Show Protected Goals Balance, which is where your emergency fund is kept. So if you click on that, you can see the amount that is in your emergency fund, and this is a great feature because it keeps it separate from the regular money you spend from your bank account using the debit card, so you can never accidentally spend it from your emergency fund. But if you do need to access your emergency fund to spend it, you can easily pull it up in the app and click transfer and transfer however much of your emergency fund you want to spend to your bank account so you can instantly use it using your debit card. To conclude the video, I hope that we've shown you just how important it is to have an emergency fund. There's no telling what can happen in life, and it's so comforting to know that you have a nice amount of cash set aside in case there are unexpected things that happen that you need to cover. To sum it up, an emergency fund just takes a crisis and turns it into an inconvenience. So I hope that wherever you are saving for your emergency fund, that you keep continuing to save and pushing forward, and soon enough you'll have a huge weight off your shoulders and you'll feel so good knowing that you have your emergency fund set aside.